Thank you so much. Well, wonderful to be here, to be with you, to be going through this exciting sermon series together. And just to clarify, my tenure in kids ministries was very short-lived. Not because of the kids, but mainly because of me. I quickly found that wasn't where I was gifted to serve, but I found other places to serve in this wonderful church. We're very excited about the new role God has for us over at Ebenezer, and we're also excited to continue to serve alongside Lakeview Church in this mission field that we call Saskatoon. And we look forward to continuing to develop a very close partnership relationship with your great church here. Also, I want to thank Pastors Darlene and Curtis and Paul, who've been very kind to me and my family over the last couple of years, really built into our lives. And so we'll be forever grateful for their ministry to us. If you have your Bibles, I'd invite you to open them up to Luke chapter 15, verses 11 to 32. Luke 15, 11 to 32. And we're going to unpack this passage together, but let's read it together. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he'd spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here, I am starving to death. I'll set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven. I've sinned against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven. I've sinned against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe, put it on him. Put a ring on his finger, put sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied. 'Your father's killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him, but he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you. I've never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never even gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him?' 'My son,' the father said, 'you're always with me. Everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" Very famous parable, probably alongside the Good Samaritan, is one of the most famous parables Jesus ever taught. Even for those of us who are outside of the Christian realm, outside of the Christian world, are familiar with the word prodigal and the story of the prodigal son. I used to work at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York as a chaplain, and when you're writing a major research paper at the graduate level or the PhD level, you have something called a thesis statement. A thesis statement is a very tight summary of your entire paper or your entire project. And I have a thesis statement for this sermon, and it is this. This is an assault on community based on idolatry, remedied through agony. This story, this parable, is an assault on community based on idolatry, remedied through agony. And we're going to work through this line by line. Let's start with this one. This is an assault on community. The most basic cursory reading of this story shows us that this is a family that is unraveling. This is a family being torn apart. This is a family going through a type of divorce. This is a family in crisis. This is a family in trauma. And the break begins right at the start of the story, when the younger son says, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Give me my share of the estate. This young man is demanding something that belongs to him. He's an heir to his father. In ancient law, the firstborn would have been given a double portion of the estate, so the older brother would have received 2/3 of the estate, and the younger son would have received 1/3. So he's asking for 1/3 of the family estate. What is required to receive an inheritance? What needs to happen? A death. Good, you're with me. That is a prerequisite in order to receive an inheritance. Someone needs to die, the death of a parent. In the culture into which Jesus is speaking, for a child to ask for the inheritance while the parent is still living would be similar to saying, "I wish you were dead." One commentator said that the correct and justified reaction of the father in this story would have been to publicly shame the son and then drive him out of the community with verbal and physical blows. This is an assault on the family. It's also an economic assault. For the father to give 1/3 of the estate, it would have meant that the family's net worth would have dropped by 30%. This is a social assault. The family name will be degraded through the shameful request of the son. Any kind of social standing or status they had would have been shot down because of the younger son's selfish actions. This is an assault on community because of the actions of the elder brother, who at the end of the story refuses to re-enter the family. This is a family in crisis. This is a family experiencing dysfunction. So this is an assault on community, and it's based on idolatry. How do we determine what the motives of these boys were? Why would they want to destroy something so precious and beautiful as this family headed by what appears to be a very loving and generous father? And that's a deep question. It's a question we can ask of ourselves. You know, I don't know the stories of many of the people in this room right now, but we live in a culture where people destroy families and community all the time. We live in a culture where families have been assaulted and destroyed through divorce, through abuse, through addiction, and through neglect. What motivates a human being to act in a way that has such destructive results for other human beings? The younger brother, this young man has a relationship with the father. He probably ate meals with him. He probably talked with him. He probably spent quality time with him. But the minute he says, "Give me my share of the estate," The minute he says, give me what's coming to me, the moment he says, give me mine, as soon as he says that, we learn something very profound and something very tragic about the younger brother. We learn that the younger brother wanted the father's things without the father. All his life, he has enjoyed the wealth and security that came from being a son to the father. But there came a point in his life where he decided he would rather have the things his father provides, but not the father. And in that one statement, Father, give me my share of the estate, we learn that the younger son wanted the father's things, but not the father. And we learn that all along, his heart had been set on the father's things, but not on the father. And this speaks to us today, because you can be obeying God, you can be praying to God, you can be reading God's word, relating to God, and yet in your heart, you find you are set on the Father's things and not on the Father. The things such as health, blessing, favor, security for your life, and the lives of your children. And this is a deep, fundamental problem in Western Christianity, because we have a Christianity that is after the blessings of God, but not of God himself. We want the healing without the healer. We want the blessing without the blesser. We want salvation without the demands of a Savior. On the back cover of one of the best-selling Christian books of all time, we read, knowing God's purposes for creating you will reduce your stress, focus your energy, simplify your decisions, and give meaning to your life. And what that subtly suggests is that there's nothing here about actually knowing God. The focus is all on the benefits that you will get from knowing God. It's wanting the Father's things without the Father. In our life of faith, we can be doing all the right things for all the wrong reasons. And for some of us, there comes a point where we decide that we want the Father's things, but we don't want the Father. What about the elder brother? The younger brother returns, and this is the greatest day in the father's life. And then we read that the celebration is this: we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead. He's alive again. He was lost, and he's found. You know, it's my personal theory that it was the killing of the fattened calf that put the elder brother over the edge. In those days, meat was a delicacy. Not like today, for a couple of bucks you can get a cardboard burger at McDonald's. Meat was a delicacy. And the fattened calf was the ultimate delicacy. And the elder brother thought, one day, maybe when he gets married, we're going to kill that calf and we're going to celebrate with the family. And every day he'd go out in the field, the calf would get fatter, and he'd get hungrier, and he'd think about what was going to happen. And he was focused on that feast that was to come for him. And now the calf is being served up. It would have probably provided food for 75 to 100 people. It was a celebration of the whole village. Everybody is joyful. Everybody is celebrated, except for one person, the elder brother. A community that has come alive with hope and joy. But the elder brother can't see any of that. All he sees is the inheritance that has been lost on the younger son. The younger brother was lost through immorality. The older brother was lost through morality, through piety. The anger of the elder brother displays the inner posture of his heart, that he also was there for the father's things, but not for the father. If the elder brother had his heart set on the father, they could have spent all of the inheritance, they could have killed all the fattened calves, and it wouldn't have mattered, because he still had the father. how is idolatry an assault on community? I'm saying that this is based on idolatry. I found a lot of help in a book that I just reread recently, Augustine's Confessions. Augustine was a great Christian leader, this saint, this icon, and he struggled with food, and he struggled with a lot of things in his life. And Augustine was an aesthete. He loved beautiful things, and he loved pleasure. And he discovered that this drive for beauty, that this drive for pleasure leads to three things. It leads to emptiness, it leads to addictive behavior, and it leads to broken relationships. And then reflecting on that, Augustine said that all of our troubles in life, listen to this, all of our troubles in life come from what he called disordered loves. And he explains it like this: every man commits murder because he loves something too much, and that's the motive of his crime. There's a splendor in all bodies that is pleasing to the eye. Worldly honor gives some modicum of satisfaction. Human friendship is a deeply satisfying aspect of humanity. And listen to this, but in the way we seek these pleasures is the way in which we sin. The way we seek these pleasures is the way in which we sin. It's because of our desire to fulfill these lower orders that we neglect the higher order of loving God. We neglect God, we neglect his word, we neglect his truth, and we neglect his love. Material things are not more important than spiritual things. I have to confess something. I love food. I love to eat food. I love really good food. My wife and I love to explore new restaurants. And I love all the food that's really bad for you, like red meat and fried foods. One night we were out at a restaurant and they had a dish there called pork belly rack. Pork belly rack. That's a big fat piece of all the meat and fat of a pig's belly, and it's fried up for you like a big piece of bacon. It's, and I'm cutting into this thing smiling, and I look up at my wife and say, I'm having a good time. And I love that piece of pork belly, but if I love that piece of pork belly more than I love my family, I would have a disordered love. Because a good piece of meat is not as important as a human being. And a human being is not as important as God. And if we put money or possessions over family and friendship, we have a disordered love. If you love human beings more than you love God, you have a disordered love. All the problems in life, all the crime, all the wars, all the pain that human beings inflict on each other stem from this root cause of disordered love. Disordered love is making good things into ultimate things. What that means is that you take something which is good in and of itself, let's say your relationship with your spouse, and that becomes the ultimate reality in your life. You make something into God that is not God. Augustine goes on, what does ambition seek but honor and glory? But only you, Lord, have a glory forever that can never be lost. What does power of the mighty desire except to be feared? But none has power that cannot be stolen but you. What does the lonely and anxious long for except a love they cannot lose? But who can give a love that cannot fade but you? What do the weary desire but rest? But there is no true rest apart from you. Thus the soul commits adultery when it seeks these things apart from you. God, we were made for you. Our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you. And so what we learn here is that the older brother had made the inheritance the ultimate thing in his life. We were in the elder brother's shoes and we were told we were not getting the full amount that we thought we would be getting. It would be natural to be sad, to be upset. But if we made that inheritance into the ultimate thing, the only thing that we were placing our hope and our trust and our security in, then we will commit murder if it is threatened. because we would see it as we would be losing our very lives. Another example is this. Imagine a married couple, but the husband spends a lot of time with another woman. He tells her his problems, he travels with her, he goes out for meals with her, he's always thinking of her. His wife finally confronts him, and he says, "What's wrong? I'm married to you. I pay the mortgage. If someone asks, I say we're married. I live with you. I help around the house. I do good things around the house. I provide for the family." The problem is that somebody else has captured his heart and his imagination. So he might be doing all the right things over here, but in his mind and heart is committed over here. And so you might be sitting here today and you might be saying, "I am a Christian. I read my Bible. I pray. I come to church. I live a moral life." But the reality is there might be something else that has captured your heart and your imagination. Career, financial security, your children, family, peer acceptance, status, all of these things may be operating on your mind and on your heart more so than the Spirit of God is. Because if anything has a controlling position in your heart, if anything is more important to your happiness than God, then that thing has become God to you, and you have a disordered love, as Augustine describes it. We're saying that this is an assault on community. What's so important? What's so great about community? Community is important because we were created for community by community. What do I mean when I say we're created by community? In order to understand this, we need to look at the doctrine of the Trinity, and I know this hurts our brains when we try to think about it. But the doctrine of Trinity is really what fully explains why we were created by community for community. The way I see it, that there are three scenarios for the existence or non-existence of God. One scenario is that God doesn't exist, so there's no God. So we're all products of time plus chance plus matter. We're all simply flukes of nature. And if that's true, then life has no meaning. No God, no meaning. A second possibility is that God exists as a unipersonal God. And what I mean by that God exists only as one being. No Father, no Son, no Holy Spirit. God does not exist in a Trinity. Only one person in the Godhead. We still believe that God is eternal, which means that God has existed in all time, which means he existed prior to creation. If that's true, then God would not have known love until he created things, because in order to love to exist, there needs to be two parties involved. Because he made the universe, he would have had only power, no love. And so the operating principle in life would have been power and not love. But in the Christian story, in the Christian reality, God exists in a Trinity. That means that before he exercised power to create the world, there was already a community of love in existence. The Father loves the Son, the Father loves the Spirit, and together each member of the Trinity has been loving each other throughout eternity. Therefore, love becomes the ultimate reality and the operating principle for life. Not a life of no meaning, not a life based on power, but a life based on love. Because each person of the Trinity serves the other, glorifies the other, loves the other. And if we are created in the image of God, then that means we are created in community, and life is all about community, and life is all about serving others. If you buy into the prevailing mood of our culture, if you live for your own happiness, achievement, personal pursuit, you will dash upon the rocks of ultimate reality, because you were created in the image of God, and because of that, you were created to be in relationship with others. You were created to do what God does within himself, and if you do this, if you put God at the center of your life, then you will know joy, you will know beauty, you will know honor, you will know power, and you will know rest. They will become realities in your life, because the God from whom the source of all those things come from is residing within you. But if you don't place God at the center of your life, you'll live a life of profound isolation, cut off from true community. If you center your life on God, not circumstances, not people, not possessions, not even on the blessings of God, then no matter what happens in your life, you will still love God and you will still be satisfied with how your life turns out. You'll be like the three young men in the book of Daniel, the story where a king sets up a gold statue of himself and commands the whole nation to bow down and worship him. But these three Jewish young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, refused to bow down. They tell the king that they believe God can deliver them. But even if God doesn't deliver them, they will still not bow down because the sentence for not worshiping the statue was death. And they say, even if he doesn't deliver us, we will not bow down. Even if God never heals me, I will not give up serving and loving him. Even if my spouse leaves me, I will never stop loving God. Even if my prodigal child never comes home, I will never stop loving and serving God. Even if I have to struggle economically, I will never stop loving and serving God. Even if I have relational struggles in my life, I will never stop loving and serving God. Even if my life circumstances do not pan out the way I thought they were supposed to, because God is the center of my life, I will still experience deep and profound joy. An assault on community based on idolatry, which is only remedied through agony. Remedied through agony. When someone has wounded us, when someone has hurt us deeply, our immediate reaction is to stem that hurt, to staunch that wound. And the most common way we do this is to wish evil upon the other person. We think we'll protect our hearts by filling it with anger and bitterness. But if the Father had done that, if the Father in our story had done that, there would have been no reconciliation. When the Son requested what was coming to him, and if the Father had reacted as the culture dictated him to react by striking him, by throwing him out of the community, there would have been no chance for reconciliation. But instead, what does the Father do? It says he divided his property among them. The word for property there is bios, which means life. The Father divided up his life. He divided up his very existence because if he was going to divide the property, the land, he couldn't have given the land to the Son. He would have had to have sold off a third of the land and give the finances to the Son. We live in an agricultural province. The financial well-being of this province is largely dependent on agriculture. In this room this morning, I'm sure there are some farmers or people who work in the ag industry. And if you're a farmer, the land is your life. And farming is a precarious profession because so many things such as weather and invasive species are out of your control. But the land equals life for someone who is dependent on farming. The Father sold the ancestral land for the sake of the Son. The Father tore apart his life for the Son. We would have thrown the agony back onto the Son because when we're in pain, we want them to be in pain. We want to throw the pain back onto the person and make them hurt like we hurt. But here the Father takes the pain onto himself, and he suffers for the sins of the Son. The Father bore the agony of the Son's sins in the hope that one day they would be reconciled. And here we come to the heart of the Christian story, because ours is a story of a father tearing apart his life for the sake of reconciliation with his children. Ours is a story of someone who knew no sin, who became sin, that we might be reconciled to God. The Christian story is a story of a son becoming a slave in order that slaves might become sons. We're saying that this story is an assault on community based on idolatry, remedied through agony. In order to bring lost men and women back into right relationship with him, there was a cost. and it was very costly. It cost the life of Jesus Christ. You were created for community. You were created to be reconciled to the living God, and then to be reconciled to one another. I'm going to invite the worship team back up as I go to my closing story here. In the early part of the 20th century, there was a young man named William Borden. William Borden had been born into a very wealthy industrial family in the eastern United States, and it was believed that he would take over the family fortune, and run the businesses. While he was a student at Yale University, he felt a distinct calling to serve God in foreign missions, and he gave his life to the missionary cause. And everybody was startled. Why would you give up so much to go overseas? But Borden was undaunted, and he felt a calling to China, and he was going to go to China. En route to China, en route to the mission field, he was struck with spinal meningitis and was in a hospital room in Cairo. And he was dying. It was obvious that his life was slipping away. And someone came to visit him and said, "William, was it worth it? You didn't even get on the mission. Was this worth it to give up so much to have this?" And Borden pointed to his Bible, to the back of his Bible. He had written 6 words. He had written, "No reserve, no retreat, no regret." And if you look, there was a date to each time when he wrote those words. When he made a commitment to foreign missions, he wrote "no reserve." When he was diagnosed with spinal meningitis, he wrote "no retreat." And as he lay on his deathbed, he wrote the words "no regret." No reserve, no retreat, no regret. There's only one way that you'll be able to say that at the end of your life, and that is if you will set your heart on the Father and not on the Father's things. So this morning, as a community, let us commit to love and serve the Father and not the Father's things. I want to thank you, Lakeview, for your kindness to me and my family. This well might be the last sermon I preach here, but I look forward to having a close partnership relationship between Ebenezer Church and Lakeview Church. And my prayer for you is this quote from John Newton. Newton writes, "By looking at Jesus' sacrifice for you, may your duty to God and the pleasure in your life be joined together, so your service and your work will be translated into joy." By looking at Jesus' sacrifice for you, may your duty to God and the pleasure in your life be joined together, so that your service and your work will be translated into joy. God bless you.